Make sure this is, I think we're up and live now. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for signing on. Thank you for catching the replay, if that's what you're doing. I know you all are very busy. You've got other appointments and things you're navigating, so feel free to watch this on a higher speed if you're catching up, multitasking, whatever you need to do. So I'm super excited to be here today for the topic of, when it comes to intensives, right, there's so many different ways that you can do them. One way that you can do them is by offering multi-day intensives. So if that's something you're doing, how do you treatment plan for that? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Feel free to let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching it back throughout. What questions do you have about multi-day treatment plans? I would love to just hear what those are, because I know I had tons of questions when I thought about, making that shift between once a week, 50 minutes to now we're meeting for 3 to 4 hours, 4 days in a row. How do we make those shifts? So let me know if you have questions and I'll answer those live if you put them in there. But if I know there's a lot of new people in the group, so just to introduce myself, my name's Amanda Paduris. I am a licensed psychologist in Oregon. I have my own private practice and am, really just working on supporting people who are also interested in really getting things going when it comes to intensives. A lot of you are interested in intensives. Let me make sure. I just got an error that some things might be slowed down a little bit. I know a lot of people are interested in intensives because, they can do so much for your practice, not just, bringing you in more income. Not that that's already not an enticing enough point, but it can also make you feel more confident as a clinician. You get to see how quickly people can make progress in their goals, and it's really rewarding to share that space with someone. And it can also just give you a lot more flexibility in your schedule, because instead of squeezing in 20, 25, sometimes above that weekly clients, you can have more of a balanced schedule if you still want to balance both. If you want to have weekly clients and intensive clients, that's what I do. I do a week kind of combination of both. Or you can just do all intensives. Like, there's a way that you can make this work for you where you are not working just harder and getting closer to burnout and compassion fatigue, but you can actually do really, really good work and something that clients actually really want. They just may not know it yet. So I've been doing intensives in my practice for quite some time. It's really helped me feel a lot more confident in the work that I do, and it's also helped me to feel more financially secure and stable, because if I know that I'm bringing in, at times I've gone up to $9,000 a month just in intensives, so that's not even just my weekly clients. I think this month I'm going to bring in closer to $10,000 just from intensives. So if I know that I've got this, which is basically, it's kind of like a side business at this point, because it's I treat it as a whole other source of income, but I'm not as worried when I need to be sick or when something comes up and I just can't see clients, because I know I've got this thing to look forward to. So it can just add lots of variety in your schedule and really help you out. So when it comes to what your intensives are going to look like, because I'm just going to get my tea out of my hot water here. When it comes to you building your intensives, because everyone's going to do it differently. Not everyone wants to do them the way that I do them or the way that other people do them, and that's totally fine. This is all about what works for you. But the biggest kind of options that you have are, are you moving into a model where you're going from traditional 45, 50, 60-minute sessions to 90-minute sessions? And you're doing weekly 90-minute sessions, bi-weekly 90-minute sessions? Is that what intensives look like for you? Because that's an option, right? You could just simply say, when I practice EMDR, IFS, Gottman, whatever you practice, you could just say, I've learned this has been really helpful in an extended session model. So that's the only way I offer it. It could be as easy as that. So you could do that, or what I do is, sometimes I work intensively with my weekly clients. Sometimes too, more often what I'm doing is I'm booking intensive packages. And that's what I'm talking about with multi-day intensives. So this can look a few different ways, where either Some people, if they're like, I need to work on the work days, I can't get time off, I need to get this done on a weekend, we'll get it done on a weekend, whether that's Friday through Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. I've even done Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, Monday. So you might be doing a few days back to back. I've also done a Monday, Wednesday, and then the following Monday before. So if you have multi-day intensives that you're doing, there's a few different things that you want to think about when it comes to treatment planning. Number one, you all already have your sense of your trainings, what your approach is, your modalities. You already kind of have a sense of the normal kind of arc of therapy, right? Like, how are we starting from building rapport to how do we start that conceptualization to how do we start working on that? How do we know what your kind of end goal outcome is? How will you know you are done with therapy? So already in an intensive model, that's a little different, right? Because especially if you are working with someone on a kind of package system like I am, for a lot of people, treatment is, okay, so we've got these 2 days and that's it. People aren't necessarily expecting, I'm going to get everything I need out of this. But intensives are a little bit, in an intensive package model, they're a little bit more focused on, here's this one thing I've really been stuck on. Here are these couple of things we can't seem to move past. Because you can do couples intensives too. So sometimes it's 2 things you're working with, 2 people you're working with, or more. So really what you're focusing in on is something to be focused on, right? Like the aspect of doing a thorough assessment at the consultation and at the intake appointment. All of that's really important, but it's not the same as, you're doing this kind of thorough assessment for the purpose of, I could be working with this person for weeks, months, years, decades. An intensive is very different. A lot of people come into consultations for intensives knowing that. They know it's different, and that's why they're there for those consultations. So, for example, I met with someone earlier this week for a consultation who said, I don't know if this is the right reason to do this, but I feel like here's these things I've been doing to try to feel better about the things that are bringing me problems. And I'm tired of feeling bad, right? Like none of that's worked. I said, that's a perfect reason to be here, because the way that I work with clients, and then I kind of gave my spiel about brain-based forms of therapy, why that's really effective for seeing big movements fast. She was sold, right? She was like, let me get the finances figured out and I'll email you with some dates. So this is, depending on what your treatment plan is, depending on what the person is coming in for, those usually will kind of be clarified even at the consultation appointment. There are a lot of people who, again, know I'm not here signing up for a therapist I'll be with a long time. A lot of people do even multi-day intensives as adjunct therapy. I've done that quite a few times, actually. So people know that they're coming to you for this intensive for, I can't get past this experience of bullying. I can't get past this anger I've got towards my whole family. I can't get past whatever it is. Like the treatment plan is, this is the thing you are particularly stuck with. You're particularly frustrated. You particularly want to see movement on. And you're basing the treatment plan around that, right? That could be one thing. That could be a small set of interrelated things. But really, again, the treatment planning is even starting at the consultation appointment. And so, for example, if someone's talking to you and saying, well, what's the difference between if we just met for 90 minutes each week versus if we did an 8-hour intensive across 2 days, right? Share with them. Well, generally, the more time we have, the more we have to get into different things. We might be able to cover more things, but you can make your recommendations, right? There might be some people who, for financial reasons, are going to say, well, I'd prefer to do what's the cheapest way that I can get this done? Not because they don't see the value in it. They probably really do see the value of it. They're probably more afraid of, it's a lot of money at once, right? We're not denying that. That is true. And it's a lot of money for a good reason. It brings a lot of value. It brings a lot of benefit. And a lot of people actually end up saving money in the long term because they don't need to be in therapy as long. So when I'm talking with people who are saying, here are my concerns, and if they're sharing with me pieces that might suggest they've got complex trauma, or there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of things that maybe aren't, what's the word I'm looking for, like co-occurring diagnoses, like any things that make the clinical presentation more complex, same as we would in a traditional treatment plan where we don't know how long we're going to be working with someone. I give that, clinical judgment of, I still think intensives are going to be really good for you. The way that I work in my intensive packages is I do like how many days, if that's a 1 day, if that's 2 days, 3 days, etc. So what I say is, well, typically for most people, I recommend that they at least start with a 1 day, 3 to 4 hour intensive. And in that time, here are generally some of the things that we can cover. In your case, with some of the things that you're talking about, some of the concerns, some of the problems you want to work through, I would actually suggest we work for no less than 2 or 3 or however much feels kind of like appropriate. And that's the thing, right? Like you can make that clinical assertion and they can still go against that, right? Like we can make this beautiful treatment plan that makes sense for what we know, and all the time things don't go according to plan or something else comes up. Like it's fine if the treatment plan you have isn't what you actually end up accomplishing. I just talked about this with someone on a consultation call the other day of, there's the difference between what people are saying, even in an intensive model of therapy, like, here's this thing I can't get past, I really want to get through this. You are not guaranteeing anything. You are not promising anything to anyone, right? All you are doing is offering, here's this extended version of therapy where we can get to a lot of things much more quickly, right? And more often than not, that does come with you feel better faster, you feel more connected to your partner faster. Like it does come with movement because it's just more of what you're doing in less time, right? You can do 4 hours of therapy a month in a once a week kind of model, or you can do 4 hours in an afternoon, right? Like that's literally all it is it's taking this and it's just squishing it down. So there is no guarantee that just because we're squishing it down, you're gonna cure everything, fix everything, move on from everything. But it does offer the opportunity to move through things quicker. So you're balancing this piece between you're not promising, you're not guaranteeing, you're not doing any of that. And, right, we know that typically the longer we see someone, the more we understand them. Usually the more effective we're being with them. So the same is true whether those 4 appointments, those 4 hours are across a month or in one chunk. So you want to be thinking about your therapy approach, how you conceptualize things, what you specialize in. And again, even on the consultation call saying, this is what I think would be really helpful for you. This is what I see be most effective with people who are presenting with concerns similar as you. So you're just giving that information. You're just sharing with them, here's how I would treatment plan. So that's first off from there. So I'm going to pause and just see if there's any questions about that. Because too, right, so again, the treatment planning starts with the consultation call. So what are you coming in for? What do I offer? How do I think this would be really effective? A lot of times you'll see, if you see individuals versus couples, you might make different recommendations there. For individuals, I always say let's at least start with a 1 day. So whether that's 3 hours, 4 hours. For couples, I usually recommend a 2 day because 1 day is really not going to be that much time. It's more time, right? That's the whole point of an intensive. But I see a lot of couples make significant movement after 2 days. So if we can get, that's a total of the way I do it, like 7 therapy hours. Right? Like, of course you're going to make a lot more than if you got like 3 therapy hours. So, who you're working with, the approaches that you work with, all of that's going to determine from the outset what recommendations you're going to make. And then once if they're like, cool, let's move forward, you send them that intake paperwork, you get a little bit more of a sense of, what's going on. You're doing some assessments for depression, anxiety, maybe trauma, dissociation. Once you get more of that kind of information, that's going to further inform your treatment plan. So by the time that you get to the initial intake, so whether that's with the individual, whether that's with a couple, then you can start to formulate even more of the treatment plan, right? Because treatment plans change. If on the consultation call you said, I think a 1 day is going to be good for you, I think 2 days is going to be good for you, and then something in the intake and assessment process changed your opinion, that's what happens, right? So share that if that's the case. So say, right, from what I've learned, thank you so much for doing all that paperwork. From what I've learned, I think we're still on a good path. Or from what I've learned, we might actually think about another day. And right, they can say no, they can say, sounds great, let's do it. All you're doing is offering your clinical judgment based on your expertise and your experience. So you're sharing with them, right? Like, here's what I've learned about you. Here's what I think would be really helpful and effective. And then what I'm really focusing in on during that intake appointment is, okay, here's the thing you said you wanted to focus in on. From your paperwork, it seems like these things could also be important. It seems like these things sometimes interfere with the processing of that first thing. So with the time that we have, right, if that's a 3-hour appointment, a 4-hour appointment, if that's a 3-day appointment, with the time that we have, here's my recommendation. And I'll share that recommendation. Right? A lot of that's going to be clinically dependent and your expertise dependent, your training dependent in terms of modalities and how you approach and conceptualize things. But I will share with them, like, I think it'll be really helpful for us to start with this thing because it feels like that's probably actually underneath all of this. Or I even say sometimes, what is the thing that is most impacting you right now? What do you most want relief from now? It's like, okay, perfect. So then we're going to start with that in the intensive session. That's what we're going to focus in on. And then we'll see whatever comes up, because in brain-based forms of therapy, there's no guarantee that the brain's going to just stick with this one thing. It's going to course correct and take us to where we need to go. But that's what we're really focusing on is, here's my recommendation / okay, what does the client want? And following that, knowing that something else might come up and you might need to shift in the treatment plan, and that's okay. Now, if you had that 1-day appointment, again, that might be a little bit different because then it's like, well, we've got 3 or 4 hours. Let's start here. Let's see where we end in 3 to 4 hours or however long you do them. I know some people are like 90 or 120 minutes sounds long enough for me, so that's totally fine. When it comes to a couple or when it comes to anyone who's doing these 2 or these 3-day treatment plans, that's where I'm starting to talk a little bit more about, okay, so here's what I think our first day is going to look like in that intensive session. Right, we're probably going to cover, I'll talk about couples in this instance because sometimes that translates into the multi-day intensives a little better. But I'll talk about, the first intensive session is really going to be focused in on understanding your dynamic, understanding your patterns, where you two get stuck. We'll talk a little bit about previous relationships, including relationships from childhood and how that might influence kind of how you're showing up with one another. I do a lot of emotionally focused therapy work, so that's why I do that. And then I'll say, and in the second day, when we get to that next set of intensive sessions, that's where we're really actually going to dive in a little bit deeper. And that's where we're going to go even further into why do you feel like I have no choice but to pull back, or I have no choice but to raise my voice. So we're going to understand even further about that, and we're really going to work on building some skills for, well, how do we catch that process, that dynamic sooner? How do we stop that from happening again? And then if we have a third day, then depending on how the second day goes, I'll say, okay, tomorrow I think what's going to be really helpful is if we start with X, and so on and so forth, right? If this all really depends on what is the structure that you're coming up with, what's the plan of how you really want to get things going. And again, your treatment modalities, your approaches, your conceptualization, what the clients are bringing in clinically. But a lot of this is ultimately what I want you to hear is that it's flexible, right? Not only where you start is not necessarily going to be where you end up. And again, we see that all the time in traditional therapy, but also like it's in collaboration with the client. Sometimes I find even more so than traditional therapy where it's week to week or every other week because they're so highly invested in it in an intensive process. And so I am always checking in with them about, here's how we're starting. This is what I'm thinking we get to today. What do you think? Okay, here's how we're ending. Here's what I'm thinking we do for our next step or the next day or whatever it is. And they give feedback on that. This is not the only thing, but one of the things I really, really like about intensives is how committed the clients are to them, right? And how much they are a part of that treatment plan, which I think also helps, from a power dynamic, like it really equalizes the playing field quite a bit more, because this isn't just, I'm the expert and I'm going to decide everything and we have to follow this strict structure for these however many hours or days, but it is too, like, are we hitting those things you were wanting to hit? Because even in an intensive, right, someone thinks they want to do brain spotting for the whole thing, and then they end up not doing the actual brain spotting or talking for 40 minutes instead of processing, which is fine, right? Like, this doesn't have to be strict. This doesn't have to look just one way. It's okay to be collaborative, and it's okay to just see how things are going along the way. So I really want you to hear that you can be flexible. These treatment plans don't have to look the same as more traditional therapy. They're not meant to. It's really just a way of thinking differently. And again, that's a piece that I appreciate about this model of therapy, because not only does it take pressure off of me, because I don't have to think about what are the next 3 months going to look like? What are the next 6 months going to look like? How are we going to work on every single step? It's like, nope, I'm just thinking about 2 days at a time, 3 hours at a time, right? I'm thinking in much smaller chunks, so things feel more realistic to me. And the clients are actively participating in that. And then it's so cool to see that change happen together, right? When you see the client's investment in it. So recapping, that ultimately a lot of this depends on what you even want to offer. Like, I do not want you to offer a week-long, 8-hour intensive package. If you don't want to work that way, don't do that. So think about, what are the ways you like to work? What are the ways you want to experiment working with? Is that 90 to 120 minutes? Is that 2 to 4 hours? What is that? Do you even want to offer multi-day intensives? Because that's an option to not do that as well. But for you, think about what's going to work, and then think about, in your niche area, your niche, whatever it's called, what do you want to be focusing on? What do you specialize at? And then if you're already doing that in your weekly work, right, like, you know how to translate that. This is just on a shorter time scale. So take off some of the pressure that just because clients can make a lot more movement faster, right? You don't have to fix something. This isn't a magic pill. This isn't a magic wand. This is just, you're doing a lot of therapy at once. And clients usually feel a lot better because of it. So what is your specialty? What are your recommendations from the consultation appointment? Might those recommendations change once you get to the intake because of the assessments and what you've learned even further about their presenting concerns? And then just following what happens, right? Because it's a lot of therapy at once, and sometimes with that comes a lot of clarity of, you know what, actually it hasn't been about this thing at all. It's actually been about this thing, right? Like, how cool is that when an aha moment can happen in 2.5 hours in one day, as opposed to 3 months down the road? So embrace some of the flexibility, embrace that some of the uncertainty and lack of, I have to treatment plan every second, that can give you a lot. So I hope that was helpful. I know a lot of you all have been asking questions either in the group or on Messenger. Please feel free to do that. Some of us have been also chatting through email, so that's a great way to contact me. Either way, I just want to support you in this, because again, not only does it really benefit your clients, it also really benefits you. I've shared before too, I have a coaching group where I've got 5 people in there who are making some great and significant progress, working on feeling more confident, working on getting a lot of their business goals on. So we've still got some space if you are looking for some more support related to therapy intensive specifically, as well as just, we look at websites, we look at flyers, we look at anything that would be supportive for you. So if anyone would like to join us, we've still got some space. But otherwise, if you have any questions, if you even just want to chat about what does that group look like, pricing costs and options and things like that, feel free to message me to get on my calendar. It's a no consultation call at all. If anything, I just want to give you some support and answer some more questions, because I would also want to make sure that the group is a good fit for you, and I would tell you if it's not. So yeah, feel free to reach out, ask questions, and I am going to be out part of next week, so I will not have a live next week. So I will plan to see you all in 2 weeks for the next one. Take care. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.